Humanity has hundreds of stories regarding the creation of the universe, the history of the planet, and the birth of mankind. Some of these stories are oral traditions and are handed down to subsequent generations in the form of songs and folklore. Other civilizations managed to record these tales in writing, forming the many religions and mythologies that we know today. Giving the subject of religion and mythology no more than a cursory glance, one may be forgiven for believing that these myths of history and creation are the misguided accounts of an ignorant and superstitious people. Truly, the stories of myth are easy to dismiss. Modern man has, for the most part, accepted the assertions of psychologists regarding these ancient tales. The gatekeepers of psychology, men like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, have suggested that the stories told by ancient man are no more than the symbolic retellings of a conflict occurring in the psyches of the individual. They reason that the gods of ancient man are no more than different aspects of the self. For example, each mythology seems to have at least one good god and one trickster or villain god, and these two gods represent the internal and external battle of good versus evil within the heart of every individual. With the wild tales of mythology being food for the incredulous, and often describing impossible happenings, this view of mythology is understandable. This interpretation of mythology, that mythology is no more than the embodiment of an individual's and society's inner struggles, is echoed in the universities, Discovery Channel specials, and everything in between. But there is something missing from this explanation. The gaping hole in this reasoning comes from the incredible consistencies woven into man's many creation stories. These consistencies are so numerous and remarkable that they invite the curious mind to explore them, if for no other reason than to explain the similarities away. Since the internal conflict in the hearts and minds of man can be symbolized by any implements, and since each mythology is retold in a way peculiar to that civilization, it's curious that ancient man would still tell a collective story regarding creation and history. The most well-known and prototypical of these creation stories comes from the Bible. In the first book of the Bible, God creates the universe, earth, animals, and humanity in 6 days, resting on the seventh day. The first two humans, named Adam and Eve, were given a paradisical land called the Garden of Eden. It is at this point a character called the Serpent, who is unambiguously described as the enemy of God, tricks Eve into eating the fruit from the tree that the Most High God forbade. The serpent's claim was that the fruit God so adamantly forbade was capable of remaking Eve as the gods. After biting into the forbidden fruit, Eve's eyes were opened, and she came to know good and evil. Eve then convinces her husband, Adam, to also eat of the fruit, thereby opening his eyes as well. When God discovered what the primal couple and the serpent had done, Adam and Eve were banished from paradise. Adam and Eve leave the garden and begin having children to the east. As humankind began to multiply, the serpent, also called the sons of God, began to lust after human women, and soon began to procreate with our race. The offspring of this union, beings who were half human and half angel, would be called the Nephilim. These Nephilim, often referred to as giants, had superhuman strength and abilities, and were known as men of renown. This early civilization, which included fallen angels, Nephilim, and humans, became increasingly wicked. After our wickedness reached a boiling point, God could no longer restrain his angry hand. So he alerts a righteous man named Noah that he is soon to destroy the world in a flood, and that Noah's family should begin straight away building a large boat so that he and his family may survive the earth's coming inundation. What's more, Noah was told to bring 2 of every animal so that earth may be repopulated after the flood waters subside. The vast majority of angels, Nephilim, and mankind were killed in this flood, which lasted for 40 days. Before the waters subsided, Noah released a raven from the ark to discover whether dry land was yet peaking above the waters. But it only flew back and forth. Next, Noah released a dove into the air, and the bird returned with an olive branch, indicating to Noah that there was indeed land nearby. With the waters subsiding, the ark would come to rest on a mountain named Ararat. Noah, his family, and the animals exited the ark and once more began to replenish the earth. After the descendants of Noah successfully repopulate the earth, they again lose God's favor. Instead of dispersing and filling every quarter of the planet, they concentrate in a land called Babylonia. The king of Babylonia, Nimrod, endeavored to build a tower that could reach heaven. This is the famous Tower of Babel. God, who is enraged by Nimrod's presumption and arrogance, takes matters into his own hands by confusing the languages of Nimrod's workforce. The Babylonian kingdom is instantly cast into disorder as its inhabitants no longer speak a single language. This act of confusing the languages accomplished God's original intent for humanity because it caused humanity to finally split up and occupy the whole earth and, most importantly, not reach heaven. Although Bible stories are the most well-known, especially in the West, they are not the first and they are not unique. Humanity's relationship with the serpent is indeed a strange one. The nature of the reptile is alien to our own, so humans have a natural aversion to reptiles. Humans are characterized by both the cold-blooded way of the reptile and compassionate sympathies that violate our sense of self-preservation and seem to stem from a mystical place in the soul. And if a human were forced to choose between the death of a reptile and the death of a mammal, he or she would most probably consign that serpent to death rather than the likes of a bunny rabbit. So it's quite curious that humans have, for so many thousands of years, revered the serpent and frequently associated it with the gods. There's hardly a single point on the globe or in history whose local population did not associate the gods with serpents and dragons. In the Bible, the serpent is often spoken of as the enemy of God. And in one case, the Bible refers to Satan as that old serpent. Even though the whole of the Bible identifies the serpent with evil, even Jesus was heard saying, "Be as harmless as doves and as wise as serpents." The problem with this statement taken literally is that reptiles aren't exactly the geniuses of the animal kingdom. Warm-blooded animals are, on the average, more intelligent than reptiles. Considering the serpent to be a creature of wisdom is an interesting choice, considering that the serpent is mostly instinctual. Egypt, a civilization dating back to 2500 BC, allegedly, also has a pantheon of gods associated with the serpent. In fact, it is nearly unheard of for an Egyptian god to be depicted without a serpent. Even the pharaohs of Egypt wore a uraeus on their headpiece. The uraeus was a serpent, which symbolized the immortals. Gods of Greek mythology are likewise associated and often depicted with snakes. Meanwhile, here in the New World, the mythologies of the Mayans, Aztecs, Incas, and Native Americans is replete with serpent symbolism. Hinduism, the prevailing religion of India, is yet another religion whose gods are consistently associated with snakes. In China and the whole of the Orient, the immortal gods are connected to or described as dragons and serpents. In Islam, the serpent is associated with Satan and demons. In Voodoo, the gods are again associated with serpents. Reptile gods are seen as far east as the Pacific Islands. No matter what place or age we examine, serpents provide a central theme in that region's mythological tales. Serpents are also repeatedly associated with villains. Even more frequently than the themes of serpentine gods is the theme of a global flood. The number of stories regarding a worldwide flood is incredible, and the similarities between the various tales of inundation are even more alarming. Most people who are even remotely familiar with Atlantis will know that it was consumed by a flood. In the Norse tradition of Sweden and Norway, a flood which poured forth from the bleeding god Ymir consumed the whole of humanity, save a man named Bergamir and his wife, who survived the flood using a hollowed-out tree trunk as a vessel. In the Sumerian Babylonian accounts, a man named Utnapishtim is warned by a god, Ea, that another god, Enlil, intends to flood the earth. Utnapishtim then built a massive boat and loaded his wife and 2 of every animal on board. As the flood began to subside, Utnapishtim released a dove, as Noah did, to see if there was dry land nearby. And like Noah from the Bible, the boat finally rested on a mountain. In Chinese mythology, Gong, the serpent-looking water god, wanted to expand his sphere of influence and so contrived to flood the world. Gong nearly succeeded but was stopped by the righteous god Zurong. In Greek mythology, Zeus is enraged by the evil mankind was partaking in, and so therefore plotted to destroy everything on earth in a great flood. But wily Prometheus warned a man named Deucalion, who builds a chest and survives the flood. In Persian mythology, the benevolent god Ahura Mazda tells a man named Yima that a terrible winter of frost and snow is upon him. Ahura Mazda commands Yima to build an underground enclosure to protect 2 of every creature and a small group of choice people. In Serbian legends, a rooster who acts as a messenger of God becomes increasingly ignored by decadent humanity. Man's greed unleashed a torrent of water from an egg that can be paralleled to a Pandora's box. Only one man, Pranyas, survived this flood by hanging on to a grapevine. The people of Southeast Asia say that a flood consumed all of humanity, save a small number of men and women aboard a raft. The Mandans, a Native American tribe, tell the story of Lone Man, who, together with the Creator, fashioned the earth and humanity. Lone Man, who was very much a savior figure, entered the world of man because he saw that humanity was plagued by evil spirits. In order to enter our world, however, Lone Man needed to be born from the womb of a virgin mother. One day a virgin girl was eating corn, so Lone Man transformed himself into a kernel of corn, which the virgin girl ate and became pregnant from. The virgin's parents considered the pregnancy holy, and the child, who was in fact a Lone Man reincarnated, was perfect in all his ways. After growing into a young man, the day came for an annual trip by boat, where Lone Man insisted the boat sail despite the presently bad weather, much to the protest of the 12 men already on board. Yet the boat did sail, and during the voyage was attacked by demons. Lone Man made short work of these attacks, and when the boat was endangered by a whirlpool, Lone Man rose to his feet and reminded the whirlpool that it was he, Lone Man, that created the waters. The whirlpool promptly dissipated. One day, Lone Man arrived to an island, proclaiming that a flood was soon to destroy the earth, and that a fortress must be built at the center of the village. He promised to return one day, and after leaving the village, the flood waters did come, which protected those who believed him. It's important to note that this tale of a chosen one who travels with 12 guys predates the arrival of Europeans to North America. In the African myth from the Mande people of Mali, an evil god named Pemba fell from heaven and was barred from returning because he stole male seeds from God. Pemba spread tainted seeds, born from incest, upon the ground. Pharaoh, his righteous twin brother that dwelt in heaven and took the form of a fish, was forced to sacrifice himself for Pemba's sin. His body was cut into 60 pieces, and the pieces formed trees which spread across the earth. Trees are, according to the Mande people, symbols of resurrection. The Most High God brought Pharaoh back to life and sent him to earth in human form aboard an ark. The ark, which landed on Mount Corolla, was of course loaded with a small group of humans and 2 of every animal. The Incas of Peru tell the story of a creator god named Viracocha, who created the world that was populated by giants he carved from stone. These giants were terribly disobedient and disorderly, and Viracocha destroyed this race of giants with a massive flood. The Hindu tradition of India, like countless others, often describes gods as taking human form and incarnating on earth. The many incarnations of Vishnu upon the earth are certainly modeled after and considered to be a savior figure. The first incarnation of the benevolent god Vishnu arrived to earth in the form of a fish and warned a man named Manu of a coming flood. The fish informed Manu to build a massive ark which, needless to say, saved Manu's life. In the Aztec mythologies of Mexico, only 2 humans survive a massive flood. Coxcoxtli and his wife, Xochiquetzal, survived the great inundation in a boat they were told to construct prior to the flood. After the subsiding of the flood waters, their boat came to rest on a tall mountain. In yet another Central American tradition, that of a tribe called the Mexicanaics, the god Tezcatlipoca desired to destroy all of mankind. This god, however, schemed to spare a small group of humans to repopulate the planet after the coming flood. So he spared a man named Tezpi, his wife, and their family in a large boat which, as usual, they were told to build and subsequently load with various animals. As the flood waters began to diminish, Tezpi sent out a vulture to assess whether the boat could be disembarked. The vulture did not return, nor did some of the other birds Tezpi released. Finally, he released a hummingbird, which did return with a branch in its mouth, confirming for Tezpi the presence of dry land. Tezpi, his family, and a multitude of animals depart from the ship and repopulate the earth. In the Popol Vuh, the sacred stories of the Mayans, the great god created humans by carving them from wood, but soon humanity lost the grace of the creator because they had forgotten him. So he sent a huge flood to consume disobedient humanity. Only a single couple, dubbed the Great Father and Mother, survived this cataclysm to repopulate the earth. The Chibcha people of Colombia tell the story of a man named Bochica, who came upon them long ago. He was an old man of a different race from the Chibchas and sported a long, thick beard. He taught the locals, who lived as barbarians, how to live civilized and in peace with each other. Bochica's wife, on the other hand, wasn't so great. She caused a global flood that nearly wiped out humanity. The furious Bochica banished his wife Chia and dissipated the waters. The Canarian people of Ecuador, the Inuit people of Alaska, and the Luceno tribe of Southern California tell tales of a small remnant of humanity surviving a great flood by taking refuge on mountaintops. The Chickasaw people of America's Dakota region say that a great flood destroyed all of humanity with the exception of a small family and 2 of every creature. And as for the Jews and Muslims, they pretty much echo the Bible's version of events. And of course you have the aforementioned Noah, whose family survived a massive flood in a boat with 2 of every animal, released birds to indicate the presence of dry land, and landed upon a mountain. Did humanity have a collective bad dream? Did a deluge of biblical proportions leave an imprint so deep that none were left unscathed? How did the traditions of so many civilizations who never made contact come to contain so many corresponding details, even minor, seemingly trivial ones? Imagine it. You arrive to a crime scene and start the investigation by talking to witnesses. Although I'd hate to make the truth a popularity contest, you'd be forgiven for disregarding the testimony of 2 witnesses who report a story wildly different than the other observers. Fortunately for me, a popularity contest requires contest, and there is none, or none who do. Even occultists speak of the flood that wiped out the noble Nephilim. Bottom line, a wicked race of both humans and non-humans, an angry creator, a small family warned by a god, 2 of every creature on a boat, a big damn flood, and humanity reborn. That's one hell of a dream.